I'm Travis Mulger, Service Manager here at Audubon location. We're going to go over the planer parts itself. First thing we need to be looking into is we need to be looking at our parallel linkage. Look for the wear in the arms, but the biggest thing that I've been finding on some of these planers some age is that we're also seeing a few bolts come loose. What I like doing is you loosen up your downforce and go ahead and lift up the row unit on every single row, and you can find those loose bolts, or if you have the worn parallel arms or the parallel bushings. Right here you can see we've got the bolts. Make sure your bushings, your washers are all in good shape. And on the other side, they look at your arrows. You're going to have movement up, down, but a very important one to pay attention to is a movement side to side. You do not want that row unit to be tilting side to side going through the field, because that will change your seating depth. Always check our chains, our sprockets. Big one to check on our ground drive planners is check the sprocket sets in the transmission. If they're getting a bad cup to them, it will cause the chains to jump over the sprockets, and you start seeing some skips in the fields. If you see a bad hook in any of the sprocket teeth, you might want to come in and get those replaced. And also just make sure that your chains are free. Variable rate drive planners, we've got a lot less chains, but we still have a few on the planners. Just make sure that all the chains and the idlers are in good shape. Pro shafts are pretty much worry-free. Always a good idea just to check the ends, make sure they don't fray where they go into the gear cases. Once again, if you do see if you see a population jump around a little bit on one row or another, always take a look at your gear drives themselves. As you get some age on them, you may get some wear in your teeth that will have to be addressed. Next thing, we're going to the seed tubes and the seed tube guards. You want them to check your wear down here. Make sure you aren't getting too close together from where the seed discs are contacting them. Then also make sure that they aren't getting too short where you're wearing down the end of the seed tube. You'll see some wear coming up sometimes along the side of the seed tube, and you have the seed bounce and roll off to the side of the seed trench. So always make sure that those seed tubes are in good shape. Okay, next thing when it comes to row cleaners. One important thing people don't realize is that we have to keep the row cleaner or the coulter above where the seed trench is. In general, you want it about 1/4 inch above the seed trench, and that helps maintain that firm seed of the seed trench, because if you start running lower than the seed trench, you will get a false bottom and you're running into some emergence issues. And to go along with this, how the planer's sitting here, this is when you want to adjust your drawbar. You want to make sure this row unit is running level. If you start running nose down, you're going to be putting that coulter lower than your seed trench, and we really want to keep away from that. And on the other hand, if we're running with the front too high, you start pulling the coulter out of the ground, you change the geometry here where you're pulling the seat, you're changing your seating depth, but you're also putting excess load in your closing system. So always get out and check to make sure that the planer is level and that you're maintaining that 21 to 22 inches off the ground for your toolbar height. Another important thing is scrapers. When it comes to the scrapers, these are actually our secondary scrapers. What we want to be doing is make sure our gauge wheels tires are adjusted up tight to the disc openers. Those are your primary scrapers, and these are your secondary. But as they wear, you're going to start losing some of that edge there. And if they wear too much, they actually start contacting the disc blade right here, and it won't be doing anything for you. So just always a good idea to crawl underneath and double check all your scrapers before you hit the field. Gauge wheels, just make sure we got that good crown here next to your disc opener. If that edge is rolled, you want to get those replaced because you lose that shearing action that you have on those gauge wheels. Going to the bushings, the older style were threaded the entire way. We have a new generation of gauge wheel arm that really helps with adjustment wise. If you see now, we're only threaded for a partial bit of the bushing instead of being fully threaded. And what we're doing is we're splitting the wear on the bushing. If you keep these things greased a while, I've seen 2,000 plus acres out of these without really needing to be adjusted. So I mean, they are well worth the money to switch over just for the ease of maintenance for you. We have the walking gauge wheel stops. You see the wear here, what we called the mustache. You'll see the wear on that and going into your gauge wheel arms themselves. If you get that bad divot in the gauge wheel arms, you can switch the gauge wheel arms side to side, so you're running on the opposite side and you have some fresh material. But one thing, if you do this, is if you do one, do them all. So that way your settings up top, you know they're all going to be the same when you adjust them. I do not like changing certain, just pieces here and there on the gauge wheels, because you want to make sure that everything is set the exact same, and you don't want to be second guessing the depth. Disc openers, brand new diameter is going to be 14 inches. We all know the old business card trick here. Put it on top, bottom. You want 1.5 to 2.5 inches of contact, and that is very important so you don't take the bearings out in the hub. Closing wheels. Always check your bushings. Make sure you don't have that placed side to side. And one good rule of thumb is, before you hit the field with the closing wheels, is find a grassy spot. Set the planer in the ground and pull it ahead a few feet. And if you're playing in grass, you won't be able to close that trench up, but you'll see exactly how it's lined up on the gauge wheel, or on the closing wheels. It's just always a good idea just to make sure that those gauge wheels are centered on the furrow, so you get that good close. Okay, we're going to make a pass with our row unit stand, showing the comparison between new parts to worn parts. Okay, here we're going to see the difference in our seed trenches. Right here we have a defined furrow wall here. It is still firm on each side, so we're getting that good pressure from our gauge wheels. We have the defined edges. You want to look to see that it's not ever smeared on the side. If you show that you're some smearing on the side, you got too much downforce. Then you want to be able to push the sides in and have them give way. Then you know you don't have them too tight. Over here you can see where we have the worn gauge wheels arms and we have the worn disc openers. It's not defined at all. It's falling in as it goes past. You don't have the good defined edges on it, and you do run into some emergence issues. You have seating, you have depth issues when you have your furrow wall look like that. And what we were talking about, having the gauge wheel set, they're spinning, they're contacting, they're touching. You want a little bit of contact, but you don't want it to be able to stall. You still want to be able to move it. And whenever you adjust your gauge wheels, always just do it lifted up in the planing position, because when they're on that threaded bushing, they do change when they go up and down. You got our disc openers. We got that nice tight contact area, 1.5 to 2 inches through here. Our frogs are in good shape. Our seat tube's in good shape. We move over here to our worn row unit. This guy didn't get it checked in time, and you can see that they're actually pulling apart. You had the worn seat tube guard in there, and you can tell the discs are worn down because that seat tube guard is actually sticking out past our disc openers. Look at our gauge wheels. See how they're able to pull away? We get a lot of planers coming in like that where these gauge wheels will pull away. And if you ever get the mud buildup inside, chances are your gauge wheel arms are worn and they're misadjusted. So that's a very important setting to make sure that those gauge wheels are tight.